Hi everyone, and welcome to Module 1, Nervous System Regulation. Now, in this session, we're going to explore what it really means to regulate your nervous system and why it's so important for your well-being and your leadership practice. We'll also talk just briefly about how some of these environmental factors shape this process. But before we dive into these specific practices in later modules, we're going to first start by building this clear foundation. So, what your nervous system does, how it impacts your state of being, and why learning to regulate is both a personal skill and a critical leadership skill. Now, many of us were never taught how to understand the signals that we've gotten from our body. And we may have actually learned that we're supposed to push through those feelings, that we're supposed to stay strong and we're supposed to just get over it. But the truth is that our nervous system is speaking to us constantly. It's trying to tell us critical aspects of what we need to know and understand. And when we ignore that, we lose access to our own clarity, our creativity, and our ability to connect with others that make us effective and compassionate leaders and human beings. So, let's talk a little bit about what is nervous system regulation. Your nervous system is actually the control center for your body, and it is constantly monitoring your environment, your internal state, your external relationships, and it's deciding whether or not you are safe or under threat in all of those different contexts. And this happens below our conscious awareness. So we're not aware that our body is constantly doing this. But this is a survival technique that has been developed over millennia for your body to be able to instinctively react to protect you. Now, the problem is that in today's context, we are not under threat like we used to be. So we don't have to worry about a lion jumping out of the woods and attacking us. But our body does not know the difference between a lion attacking us and that neurological response and someone threatening our ego or our judgment or triggering vulnerability in us, and then our body activating that nervous system. It doesn't know the difference. So what we have to do as leaders is learn to regulate our nervous system, to bring that system back into balance before it starts to impact things like the way that we interact with other people, the decisions that we make, or anything along those lines. Now, regulation doesn't mean that you don't feel stress. We all feel stress all the time. It's natural. In many cases, it's actually useful. But regulation is about being able to return to that state of level-headed groundedness after an activation. And so our body flares up and says, whoa, danger, pay attention, something's wrong. And then from there, we have to tell our nervous system we're actually safe, physically and physiologically calm it back down, and to help put ourselves in that grounded and flexible state where we can respond with conscious choice. Now, in many circumstances, when someone's nervous system is activated, it triggers an emotional and a physiological response in which people subconsciously say and do things that they don't necessarily mean to say or do, or they don't act in alignment with what they believe or what their intentions actually are. So, as leaders, if we want to be congruent and we want to practice what we believe, then we have to be able to regulate our nervous system so that it doesn't take over and hijack our responses. Now, to understand this a little bit better, we're going to look at the autonomic nervous system. And now there are two main branches of this nervous system. It's the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. You probably have heard these terms before, but the sympathetic nervous system is the accelerator. It's the thing that mobilizes you in that moment to deal with the challenges. And it looks like your heart rate speeding up, your muscles getting tense, and your energy coming together to be directed outward. And this is what we call our fight or flight response. And so this is our body actively telling us, pay attention, danger, something needs to happen. We don't know what, but we need to pay attention. And our parasympathetic nervous system is that break. It's what allows our body to rest and recover and to repair. And things like breathing and digestion and things that help us to feel more at ease are triggered in this state. And it's that calming effect. Now, when we talk about regulation, we're forcing the parasympathetic nervous system to come back online. And we do that through the different techniques that we're going to talk about in later modules. But for now, all you need to know is that there are these two parts of the automatic nervous system, and that is the sympathetic, which is the trigger response, and the parasympathetic, which is what calms. Now, we also have the social engagement system, and this is connected to the vagus nerve. So many of you probably know that your vagus nerve allows you to connect through your facial expressions, your eye contact, and your vocal tone. And this is the system that is vital for your leadership presence, because your presence is what is going to communicate either safety or threat to your team long before your words actually do. Now, we're not going to cover it in this course, but I have books and articles and other things that talk about presence and how it's so important to this process. But since this course is dedicated to regulating your nervous system, we're just going to focus on the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system responses so that we can regulate. Now, let's talk really quickly about regulation and dysregulation. So when we are dysregulated, we are not able to think clearly, we're not able to connect with others in the way that we want or need to connect, and we have a really hard time staying present in challenging circumstances. And in order to feel steady, calm, and focused, we have to be able to regulate so that we can bring clarity, we can connect, and we can stay present. Now, when we're dysregulated, we might experience things like anxiety or restlessness or irritability. That's my trigger. Irritability is my trigger. And we might also freeze or shut down because we're so numb or detached that we feel like we're not actually able to act. And sometimes it is experiencing reactivity. So snapping at others for no apparent reason, but we've got this unconscious response that tells us to snap or to rush our decisions or to completely withdraw. And that reactivity is what we want to be able to pinpoint so that we can instead pause, regulate, and then make a conscious choice to move forward. Now, we all cycle through these states, and regulation is about noticing them and having the tools to balance out your nervous system. And this matters for us because our nervous system is linked to things like our physical health, our resilience, our emotional well-being. And if we are chronically dysregulated, then this is going to contribute to things like burnout, actual physical illness in our body, strained relationships, and other things. But when we can regulate, then we reduce the impact of that stress and we improve our recovery times, and we get to experience greater satisfaction with ourselves and our partnerships. Now, let's talk really, really briefly about why this is so important for leaders. Now, if you are a leader, we've shared this a little bit already, but the stakes are higher for you because you don't only have to balance and regulate your own nervous system, but you also have to think about it in the context of how your nervous system is going to ripple outward and impact your team. And so recognizing that your nervous system doesn't just impact you, but that it actually sets the stage or the tone for your team is what is going to make or break your leadership. Because teams are going to mirror the emotional state of their leader. A dysregulated leader might unintentionally create a culture of tension, fear, or urgency. But a regulated leader can signify safety. It can say, they can foster trust and collaboration and innovation while also saying whatever it is that they want to get at. If it is trust, collaboration, or innovation, then they can say that. But their energetic exchange is going to have that presence or that essence before they even speak words. And so I want us to imagine two different scenarios here. In the first one, we have a leader who storms into a meeting. They speak quickly, they are tapping their pen, they're snapping at people's questions, and of course, the team is more than likely going to withdraw. People will hesitate to share information, and the meeting will have little to no progress. Now, in the second scenario, the leader actually is able to pause before they enter that space. They're able to take a grounding breath. They're able to regulate their nervous system. They're able to set an intention for how they want that meeting to go and how they plan to respond if and when their nervous system is activated. And then they're able to walk in with a steady voice and a calm demeanor. Even if challenges arise in that circumstance, the team feels safe to contribute because the leader in this case not only did the pre-work, but they also continue to regulate as they're in that meeting. And so when someone asks a question that is poking the leader or trying to trigger a defensive response in the leader can effectively navigate that challenge in that moment with the regulation techniques. And the difference is the regulation. How do they regulate when they are triggered? Now, of course, you can do all the prep work in the world. You can make sure that you're prepared and you're ready and you know exactly which regulation techniques you're going to use. But different environmental contexts are going to challenge you in different ways. And what's really, really important with this is to not only know what are the regulation techniques that help you in the different circumstances, but what are the regulation techniques that you can use in the environments that you are in. And so a military context is very, very different than a nonprofit context. And one regulation technique that works in a military setting is not going to work in a nonprofit setting. And either one of those may not work in a corporate setting. So we have to be able to know, how does the environment that we're in influence this process? Because regulation is not just individual, it's actually shaped by our environment. We have to consider things like the physical environment. Okay, is it noisy? Is there light or no light? And how is the workspace actually designed? Is it individual office spaces or is it large open co-working spaces? What is the cultural environment like? And so do we have an urgency culture, or do we feel pressure to constantly produce? Are there equity gaps or other things that come into play in terms of the cultural dynamics that we're a part of? And then we also have to consider the relational environment. And so, do people actually feel safe in that environment? Do they feel safe? Do they feel heard? Do they feel valued? Do they feel as though they belong in that context? Because if they do or if they don't is going to impact how each person tries to regulate or co-regulate in those environments. And then finally, the last environmental factor is access to resources, right? So do we have access to nature? Can we go outside, take a walk in the park, and then come back regulated? Or can we go somewhere, find a quiet space to rest? Can we have a supportive practice? So can we go to a yoga class? Can we go to a qigong class or a breathwork session or a meditation session? And all of these things are going to influence our ability in that context. And we have to be able to recognize what are those environmental factors and how do we navigate them. Now, leaders who can pay attention to this are going to be able to create conditions that reduce unnecessary stress and support collective regulation. And this might mean normalizing things like taking breaks, pausing and reflecting before making decisions, holding meetings in quieter spaces, or modeling practices like grounding or breathing before they start discussions or as discussions become heated. And each one of these is going to influence how we are able to bring our leadership and our presence into our dynamics and how we can actually shape or influence change in those dynamics. Now, I want to do another guided practice, and this is going to be about awareness and regulation. And what I want to do is I want to try this practice, and I want you to think about some ideas as part of this experience. So, settle in. Find a comfortable position. Again, it doesn't matter if you're seated, if you're standing, or if you're laying, as long as you're comfortable and you feel like your body is supported. I want you to notice. So take a slow breath in through your nose and gently exhale through the mouth. As you breathe, I want you to scan your body again. Notice your shoulders, notice your facial expressions, your chest, your stomach. Where do you feel activation and where do you feel ease? Then I want you to anchor. So I want you to place one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly, and I want you to feel the rise and fall as you breathe. And I want this gentle touch to be a reminder to you and to your nervous system that you are safe, that you have the time and space to process what you need. And then I want you to breathe again. So inhale for a count of 4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I want you to exhale for a count of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I want you to continue this for a few rounds. Inhale for a count of 4. Exhale for a count of 6. Another inhale for a count of 4. And exhale for a count of 6. Another. And what I want you to do here is with each exhale, I want you to imagine that your body is letting go of any tension that it has, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical or physiological. I want you to just imagine releasing it with the exhale. Now I want you to take a moment to to reflect in silence what has shifted in you, in your mind, in your body. And while your state might not be completely different, I want you to notice even a subtle sense of softening or focusing of your attention. And if you can notice that shift, that is a sign of being able to regulate. When you can calm your body and your nervous system, tune into your thoughts and your physical body, ask yourself important questions and notice the shifts, that is regulation. So as we're in this state, I want to ask you a couple of questions. How does your body usually signal to you that you are under stress? Now remember here, everyone's different and everyone has different signals. So what are the ways that your body signals to you that you are under stress? And when do you notice yourself becoming dysregulated most often? So what are the circumstances that you notice yourself becoming dysregulated? Is it in conflict? Is it when you have to make decisions? Or is it when you're under pressure for something? And being able to understand when you are most triggered will help you to prepare appropriately if and when you know that you will be going into those circumstances. Next, I want you to think about, as a leader, how does your state influence the people around you? And what environmental factors make regulation easier for you or harder for you? So think back to some of those environmental factors: the physical environment, the cultural environment, the relational environment, whether or not you have access to resources in that environment, and what factors of that environment make regulation easier or harder for you. Once you know some of these things, then you can start to understand and be aware of how you need to plan and how you need to prepare for different circumstances to be able to regulate in the moment. Because ultimately, regulation is about, in the moment, you're activated, you're triggered, and you are able to calm in that moment. And so if you know the answer to some of these questions, then you already can start to say, when I'm in this context, when I am in this situation, when I have to do this thing, then I can start to prepare myself for that environment to make sure that if I am triggered, I know how to consciously regulate my nervous system and respond. Now, as we close out this module, I want to talk about a couple of things. So we have built the foundation here for helping you to understand what your nervous system is, what regulation means and why it matters, as well as how your environment shapes your ability to regulate. We've also practiced a short regulation exercise that you can return to really at any time that you might need. And in the next module, we're going to actually explore how you can tailor regulation for your circumstances. Again, regulation is not a one-size-fits-all practice, and we have to look at why certain practices might calm us in one situation or activate us in another, or might calm one person and activate another person. And We have to be able to do this so that we can begin to identify what works for us in what environment, what context, so that you have a plan for your unique nervous system and your context. And your ability to do this, again, is what is going to define your leadership presence. So, with that, I will see you in Module 2.